Dawn broke over New York City, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. And 8 billion humans watched their screens in silence. The visions had ended hours ago. But no one knew what to say in the UN conference room. World leaders argued in whispers while the Ascended waited outside with infinite patience. Their ship still hovering above like a doorway to the future. Una sat by the window, watching the sunrise, feeling the weight of everything she had witnessed pressing down on her. Shoulder's Secretary General Choi approached and sat beside her, looking older than she had the day before. "They want to know what we should do," Choi said. "The presidents and prime ministers, the generals and diplomats, they all want answers. And none of them know where to find them." Una shook her head slowly. "I do not think anyone can answer that question for someone else," she said. "That is the whole point, is it not? That we have to choose for ourselves." A commotion at the door made them both turn. And Una saw Admiral Guk pushing his way through with a tablet in his hand and fury on his face. "This is a trick," he shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "These beings have shown us images, nothing more. Stories designed to manipulate us into doing whatever they want." Una rose to her feet. "You saw what I saw," she said. "You felt what I felt, the grief, the sacrifice, the love. Do you really believe that was all a lie?" "I believe that any species capable of traveling through time is capable of creating convincing illusions," Guk replied. "And I believe we would be fools to accept their gift without understanding what they truly want from us." The argument might have continued, but a soft light filled the room as Siren appeared in the doorway, her presence immediately silencing every voice. "The Admiral is wise to be cautious," she said. "And he is correct that we have not told you everything." Choi stepped forward, her diplomatic instincts taking over. "Then tell us now," she said. "What is it that you truly want?" Siren moved to the center of the room, and the other Ascended followed, forming a circle around her that glowed with gentle luminescence. "We want humanity to become what it can become," Siren said. "Not because we need anything from you, but because we love you, the way children love their parents, the way the future loves the past that made it possible." She raised her hands, and images appeared in the air around her. Images of 2 different futures. One showed humanity continuing on its current path, developing technology, spreading slowly across the solar system, eventually meeting other civilizations and repeating the same patterns of fear and conflict that had marked human history for millennia. The other showed humanity awakening, humans learning to access the dimension of potential, using their emotions to create and heal and build, becoming the species that would one day save the galaxy. "Both paths are possible," Siren said. "And we cannot tell you which to choose, because the choice itself is what matters. And a transformation that is forced is no transformation at all." "Then, what is the gift you mentioned?" Una asked. "What are you offering us?" Siren lowered her hands, and the images faded. "We can awaken the connection," she said. "We can help any human who wishes it to consciously access the dimension of potential, to feel for the first time the true extent of what their mind can touch." "And what does that mean for us?" Admiral Guk demanded. "What would we become?" "Yourselves," Siren said simply. "Nothing more and nothing less. But you would finally see yourselves clearly, and you would understand that the things you have always called weaknesses are actually your greatest gifts." Silence fell over the room, and Una could feel the tension in the air, the fear and hope and uncertainty that gripped every heart. She thought about everything she had seen, the beauty and the horror, the sacrifice and the transcendence. And she knew that she could not make this choice for anyone else, but she could make it for herself. "I want to try," she said, stepping forward to stand before Siren. "I want to feel what you are offering." "Una," Admiral Guk warned, "this is my choice," she said, without turning around. Not the Ewan's choice, not the world's choice. Just mine. And if I am wrong, then I will pay the price alone. Siren's eyes glowed with warmth and pride. You will not be alone, she said. You have never been alone, and after this, you will finally understand why. She reached out and touched Yuna's forehead one last time, and the connection opened like a flower blooming in her mind. Yuna gasped as she felt it, the dimension of potential spreading out before her like an infinite ocean. And she realized that she had been touching it her whole life without knowing every dream she had ever had, every moment of inspiration. Every time she had felt connected to something larger than herself, it had all been real. And now she could see it. She could see the threads that connected her to every other human being on Earth. Billions of lights shining in the darkness, each one unique and precious and capable of wonders they had never imagined, and beyond them. She could see the future, not as fixed and inevitable, but as a garden of possibilities waiting to be cultivated, waiting for humanity to choose which seeds to plant. Tears streamed down her face as she turned to face the cameras, to speak to the billions of people who were watching. I cannot tell you what to do, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. I cannot tell you that this is safe, or that it is right, or that it will lead to the future we were shown. She paused, gathering herself. But I can tell you what I feel, she continued. I feel that we are more than we have ever believed, that our hearts are larger, and our spirits are brighter, and our potential is greater than we have dared to imagine. She smiled through her tears, and the sun rose higher behind her, flooding the room with golden light. We have always been afraid of what makes us different, she said. Our emotions, our dreams, our capacity for love and grief and hope. But maybe those things are not weaknesses to be overcome. Maybe they are gifts to be embraced. Around the world, humans watched and listened and felt something stirring in their own hearts, a spark of recognition, a whisper of possibility. The Ascended have offered us a choice, Yuna said. Not a command, not a requirement, just an invitation to see ourselves as we truly are. And I believe that is a gift worth accepting. She looked at Siren, at the luminous being who was both her descendant and her ancestor, her future and her past. I am ready, she said. Siren smiled, and the other Ascended began to sing, a harmony that resonated through the dimension of potential and touched every human heart on Earth. Then let us begin, Siren said. Yuna closed her eyes and felt herself expanding, connecting, becoming part of something vast and beautiful and eternal. The transformation had begun, not because humanity had become something new, but because they had finally seen what they had always been, and across the world, one by one, others began to make the same choice, reaching out toward the light that had always been waiting for them, taking the first steps on a journey that would lead them to the stars. The future was uncertain, as it had always been, but for the first time, humanity faced it with open eyes and willing hearts. They were ready to become what they were meant to be. Night had fallen over New York, but no one on Earth was sleeping. Billions of people watched their screens as Siren touched Yuna's forehead once more. And the final vision began. Yuna found herself floating in space, looking down at a galaxy that blazed with countless stars. And she felt a deep peace settle over her heart. This is your galaxy as it appeared in the year 2987, Siren said. Humanity had become the guardians of 1,000 worlds, and the elder races who once feared you now called you friends and protectors. The vision showed humans and aliens working together, building stations that orbited dying stars, creating gardens on barren moons, teaching children of 100 species in schools where laughter echoed in 12 languages. It seemed that the future would be bright forever, Siren said. But the universe is vast, and humanity had not yet met its greatest enemy. Something appeared at the edge of the galaxy, something dark and terrible that made Yuna's soul recoil in horror. It was not a creature or a ship or a weapon, but an absence. A void that swallowed light and hope and everything that gave existence meaning. The devourer, Siren said. And her voice trembled with ancient fear. It came from beyond the galaxy's edge. From a place where the laws of reality had twisted into something wrong. Yuna watched as the devourer touched the first star system in its path. And she watched as that system simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not killed, but erased. As if it had never been there at all. The devourer did not kill, Siren explained. It unmade, and whatever it consumed was lost forever. Was no afterlife, no memory, no echo in the dimension of potential. Just complete and absolute nothing. The vision showed the galaxy's civilizations scrambling to respond. Fleets of ships from every species converging on the devourer's path. Weapons of unimaginable power being deployed against the advancing darkness. None of it mattered. The devourer could not be fought, Siren said. Weapons passed through it without effect. Ships that approached too close simply vanished. And nothing anyone tried could slow its advance. Yuna watched as trillion-year-old empires fell in weeks. As species that had existed since the birth of the galaxy winked out of existence. As the elder races who had once thought themselves masters of creation fled in terror from something they could not understand. They came to humanity, Siren said. The same races that had tried to destroy you 600 years before. They came begging for salvation. The vision shifted. And Yuna stood in a vast chamber where human leaders gathered with representatives of every surviving species. Their faces drawn with desperation and exhaustion. An old woman stood at the center, her white hair flowing like a river of stars. Her eyes burning with fierce determination. President Yunji Kang, Siren said. She led humanity during its darkest and brightest hour. Yuna listened as Yunji addressed the assembly. Her voice strong, despite the weight of what she was about to propose. Our scientists have discovered one thing that can harm the devourer, Yunji said. Sacrifice, genuine sacrifice, where a conscious being chooses to give something up freely. Not out of fear, not out of compulsion, but out of love. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. And Yuna saw the alien delegates struggling to understand. The devourer consumes consciousness, Yunji continued. It feeds on existence itself, but it cannot digest something that is given willingly. And true sacrifice is poison to its very nature. What are you proposing? One of the elder delegates demanded. Yunji's eyes filled with tears. But her voice did not waver. The Ascension Protocol, she said. We will ask for volunteers, billions of them. Humans who are willing to merge their consciousness together and sacrifice their individual existence to create something new. The vision showed what happened next. Showed the call going out across human space. Showed the response that came back. Billions volunteered. Yuna watched as humans from every world. From every walk of life, from every age and background, stepped forward to offer themselves. She watched as they gathered on 1,000 different planets, holding hands with strangers who would become their family, saying goodbye to loved ones they would never see again. They did not die, Siren said. They transformed, their individual minds merging together into a single vast consciousness that called itself the Kindred. The vision showed it. Showed the light that erupted from 1,000,000 different places as billions of humans became one. A being of pure will and love and defiance that blazed brighter than any star. The Kindred confronted the devourer, Siren said. And the battle lasted 17 years. Yuna watched the war. Watched the Kindred wrap itself around the devourer like arms, embracing a struggling monster. Watch the darkness thrash and fight against the light. In the end, Siren said, the Kindred realized that the only way to stop the devourer forever was to sacrifice everything it was. to pour every drop of its combined existence into sealing the void away. Tears streamed down Yuna's face as she watched the kindred speak its final words to the galaxy it had saved. "We were afraid once," the kindred said with billions of voices speaking as one. "We were small and alone and uncertain, but we learned that fear is just love in another form. And love never truly dies." The light intensified until Yuna could see nothing else. And when it faded, the devourer was gone, sealed away in a prison made of pure sacrifice. But so was the kindred. They gave everything. Yuna whispered, "Almost everything," Siren said. But before the end, the kindred scattered seeds, small pieces of itself sent backward and forward through time. And those seeds grew into us. The vision faded, and Yuna found herself back on the rooftop, the night sky blazing with stars above her. "You are what is left of them," she said. "Understanding at last, you are the children of humanity's sacrifice," Siren nodded. And her luminous eyes were bright with something that looked like love. "We exist outside of time now," she said. "We have seen the beginning and the end. And we have come to this moment because the choices humanity makes in the next century will determine whether you walk the path to ascension or fall to darker alternatives." Yuna looked at the stars, at the distant lights that humanity would one day touch and transform and ultimately give everything to protect. "What do you need from us?" she asked. Siren smiled, and in that smile was the pride of a billion human hearts. "We need you to choose," she said. "We need you to decide what kind of species you want to be." 3 hours passed while the world's leaders debated what to do, and Yuna sat in a corner of the UN conference room trying to make sense of what she had seen. The Ascended waited patiently outside, their ship still hovering above the building like a promise and a warning combined. Finally, Secretary General Choi approached her with tired eyes and a determined expression. "They want you to receive more visions," she said, "and they want it broadcast to the world so everyone can understand." Yuna nodded slowly. "I am ready," she said. Though she was not sure if that was true, they set up cameras on the rooftop, and technicians connected devices that would project whatever images appeared in Yuna's mind onto screens around the globe. Siren approached with that same gentle smile, and behind her, the other Ascended began to hum a low tone that seemed to make the air itself vibrate with anticipation. "What you saw before was the awakening," Siren said. "Now I will show you what happened when the elder races decided that humanity had become too dangerous to live." She touched Yuna's forehead again, and the world dissolved into light. Yuna stood above a beautiful planet covered in green continents and blue oceans. A world that looked almost like Earth, but with unfamiliar coastlines. New Bizin, Siren said, founded in 2298. Home to 800 million humans by the year 2341. Ships appeared in the sky above the planet, hundreds of them, thousands. A vast armada of vessels from a dozen different elder species. They called themselves the Preservation Coalition. Siren continued, and they decided that humanity's ability to touch the dimension of potential was an unacceptable threat to galactic stability. Yuna watched in horror as the ships began to fire, as beams of terrible energy rained down on the planet below, as cities burned and oceans boiled, and the screams of millions echoed across space. "No," she whispered. No. 800 million humans died in a single day," Siren said, and her voice was heavy with ancient grief. "Men and women and children, dreamers and artists and scientists. Families who had traveled across the stars to build a new home." The vision shifted, and Yuna saw humans across the 12 systems receiving the news. Saw faces crumple with horror and disbelief. Saw tears flow like rivers across 100 worlds. The coalition expected humanity to surrender, Siren said. They expected that such a devastating blow would break your species forever. But it did not, Una said. Understanding beginning to dawn. It did not. Siren confirmed. Instead, something happened that the elder races could never have predicted. The vision expanded. And Una felt it now, felt the grief of billions of humans rising up from countless worlds. A wave of sorrow so vast and so deep that it seemed to fill the universe itself. And then she felt that sorrow reach out into the dimension of potential and take hold of something there. Something fundamental to the fabric of reality. Human grief became weaponized, Siren said. Not through any conscious choice, but because human emotions carry actual weight in the cosmos. And when enough humans feel the same thing at the same time, reality itself bends to match. Una watched as stars in the Coalition's home systems began to flicker and dim. She watched as crops withered in fields that had been fertile for millennia. She watched as children were born without the capacity for joy, their minds touched by an echo of human sorrow that would not let them go. The elder races begged for peace within 6 months, Siren said. They could not understand what was happening to them, could not comprehend that they were feeling the consequences of the pain they had caused. The vision changed. And now Una stood in a laboratory where a young woman studied scans of human brains and alien brains side by side. Dr. Sujin Yoon, Siren said. She was the first to develop a complete theory of emotional physics. Una watched as binge. Sujin presented her findings to a room full of humans and aliens alike. Her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was describing. Human emotions are not merely chemical reactions in the brain, Sujin said in the vision. They are connections to the dimension of potential, and through that connection, they can alter probability, influence matter, and shape the very nature of reality. Love builds, Siren said alongside the vision. Hatred destroys, grief echoes across time and space. Hope illuminates paths that did not exist before, and fear can close doors that should remain open. The scene shifted one final time, and Una saw humans training in ways she had never imagined. She saw warriors whose courage burned so bright that enemy soldiers dropped their weapons and wept at the sight of them. She saw healers whose compassion flowed from their hands like golden light, closing wounds and curing diseases that medicine alone could never touch. She saw diplomats who spoke with such perfect sincerity that lying became physically impossible in their presence. And treaties signed in their company could never be broken. Humanity became the most powerful force in the galaxy, Siren said, not because of weapons or technology, but because you learned to use what you had always possessed. Our hearts, Una whispered. Your hearts, Siren agreed. The elder races learned to fear human anger, for an angry human could curse their bloodline for generations. But they also learned to crave human friendship, for a human who loved you could bless your entire world. The vision began to fade, and Una felt herself returning to her body on the rooftop. But this was not the end, Siren said as the light dimmed. This was not the greatest transformation. Una opened her eyes and saw that everyone around her was weeping, their tears falling freely as the screens replayed what she had witnessed. There is more, she said. Her voice hoarse. Siren nodded, and for the first time, Una saw something like sorrow in the Ascended's luminous eyes. The greatest transformation required the greatest sacrifice, Siren said. And that story is the reason we have come to you now. She looked up at the sky, at the stars that were just beginning to appear in the darkening blue. Your species learned to create with emotion, she said. Then you learned to fight with emotion. But finally, you learned to transcend emotion, and in that transcendence, you saved the galaxy itself. Una took a deep breath and wiped the tears from her face. Show me, she said. Show me everything. Una opened her eyes and found herself standing in a city she did not recognize. a city of towering spires that reached toward a sky filled with 3 moons and a distant spiral galaxy. She could feel Saren beside her, a warm presence without physical form, guiding her through this vision of the future. This is New Sol, Saren's voice said in her mind. The capital of the 12 systems, built in the year 2247 on a world your people named. Hope Yuna watched as humans walked through the streets below. Humans who looked exactly like the people she knew, wearing clothes that were strange but recognizable, going about their lives under an alien sky. By this time, Saren continued, humanity has spread across 12 star systems, and you have met 47 alien civilizations. 47, Yuna breathed. That many. The galaxy is old, Saren said, and it is crowded with life. But humanity arrived late to the great gathering of species, and the elder races did not take you seriously. The scene shifted, and Yuna found herself in a massive chamber filled with beings of every shape and size. Creatures with scales and fur and feathers and things she had no words for. And among them sat a small group of human diplomats looking very young and very small. The Galactic Assembly, Saren explained. Humanity petitioned for membership 7 times before being granted observer status. And even then the elder races viewed you as clever animals, useful for certain tasks but fundamentally limited. Yuna felt anger rising in her chest. Why? She asked. What did they think was wrong with us? Everything and nothing, Saren said. Humans were seen as emotional, irrational, short-lived, and obsessed with things the elder races considered primitive. Things like art and music and stories. The vision changed again. And now Yuna stood in a laboratory where a middle-aged man worked at a console covered in symbols she could not read. This is Dr. Minjin Park, Saren said. In the year 2287, he made a discovery that changed everything. Yuna watched as Dr. Park stared at his screen with growing wonder on his face, his hands trembling as he checked his calculations again and again. What did he find? Yuna asked. He discovered that human consciousness does not exist entirely within the brain, Saren said. A part of every human mind extends into another dimension, a dimension of pure potential that the elder races could not perceive or access. Yuna struggled to understand. Another dimension. She repeated, Your people called it many things over the centuries, Saren said. The realm of dreams, the place of imagination, the source of inspiration. But Dr. Park was the first to prove it existed scientifically. The vision expanded, and Yuna saw waves of energy flowing from human minds into a space that existed between moments. A vast ocean of possibility that shimmered with every color and none. This is what makes humans unique, Saren said. Every species in the galaxy has intelligence, and many have emotions. But only humans have this connection to the dimension of potential. What does it mean? Yuna asked. What can we do with it? The scene shifted once more. And now Yuna stood in a concert hall where a woman sat at an instrument that looked like a piano made of light. The woman began to play, and the music that emerged was unlike anything Yuna had ever heard. Sounds that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Melodies that made her see colors and taste emotions. Once humans learned to consciously access the dimension of potential, Saren said, everything changed. The concert hall faded and was replaced by an art gallery where paintings moved and breathed, showing scenes that existed between heartbeats. Then, a theater where actors performed a play that the audience experienced from inside, feeling every emotion as if it were their own. Then a laboratory where scientists solved impossible equations by dreaming the answers into existence. The elder races watched in growing unease. Saren said, for 10 million years, they had believed that consciousness was bound by physical law, that reality could only be observed but never touched by the mind alone. Yuna saw the alien diplomats whispering among themselves, saw fear in their strange eyes. They were afraid of us, she realized. They were terrified, Siren confirmed. Because humans were doing things that should have been impossible. Creating art that changed the viewer, music that healed wounds. Stories that came true. The vision darkened. And Yuna felt a chill run through her. What happened next? She asked. Though part of her did not want to know, the elder races faced a choice, Siren said. They could accept humanity as equals and learn from you. Or they could try to destroy what they could not understand. They chose destruction. Yuna whispered. Some of them did, Siren said. But they underestimated how much humans had grown. And they did not understand the most important thing about your species. What is that? The vision began to fade. And Yuna felt herself being pulled back toward her own time. That human emotions are not weakness, Siren said. They are power, and when humanity learned to use that power, the galaxy would never be the same. Yuna found herself standing on the rooftop again, surrounded by the anxious faces of diplomats and soldiers, with Siren still touching her forehead. That was only the beginning, Siren said softly. There is more to show you, much more, but you need time to absorb what you have seen. Yuna's legs gave out beneath her. An Admiral Guk caught her before she could fall. What did you see? Secretary General Choi demanded. What did she show you? Yuna looked up at the faces of her fellow humans. At these people who did not know what they would become, who could not imagine the power sleeping inside them. She showed me hope, Yuna said. She showed me that everything we thought was weakness is actually our greatest strength. And in her mind, she could still hear the music from the future. The songs that humans had not yet learned to sing. The melodies that would one day reshape the stars. The ship came down through the clouds like a dream made solid. And every person on Earth stopped what they were doing to watch. It was not made of metal or glass or anything humans had ever built before. And its surface moved like living skin, shifting colors from silver to gold to deep purple as it descended over the city of New York. Military jets scrambled from bases across the eastern coast, their pilots receiving orders to observe but not engage. And the whole world held its breath as the massive vessel came to rest. 300 meters above the United Nations. Headquarters Dr. Unibeek stood on the rooftop of the UN building with a dozen other scientists and diplomats. Her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. And she watched as a beam of soft white light extended from the bottom of the ship to touch the ground. She had spent 20 years studying the possibility of alien life. And now that it was here, she found that all her theories and preparations meant nothing at all. The beings that descended through the light were not what anyone expected. They were tall, perhaps 2.5 meters, with bodies that seemed almost human but more graceful, more refined, as if someone had taken the human form and polished away all its rough edges. Their skin glowed with an inner light that shifted like sunlight on water, and their eyes were deep pools of swirling color that held knowledge beyond anything Yuna could imagine. There were 7 of them, and they wore no clothing but needed none, for their bodies seemed to generate their own covering of light that flowed around them, like liquid silver. The leader stepped forward, and Yuna knew instantly that this one was the leader. Not because of any mark or symbol, but because of the way the others moved around her. Like planets orbiting a gentle sun. We come in peace, the being said. And her voice was music, pure and clear. Speaking in English, but somehow Yuna knew that every person on Earth was hearing her in their own language at the same moment. We are the Ascended, and we are your children. Chaos erupted among the gathered officials. But Yuna remained still, her scientific mind racing through possibilities and finding none that made sense. Secretary General Hound Choi stepped forward with admirable courage, her hand steady despite the impossibility of what stood before her. You claim to be our children, Hound said. Please explain what you mean by this. The leader smiled. And it was a smile that held 2,000 years of history in its curve. "My name is Siren," she said. "We've traveled here from the year 4000 of your calendar, and we have come to show you what humanity will become." Admiral Taiwan Guk pushed his way to the front, his military uniform crisp and his face hard with suspicion. "Time travel is impossible," he said. "Our physics proves it cannot be done." Siren turned her luminous eyes to him, and there was no anger in her gaze, only a kind of patient affection. "Your physics is a child learning to count," she said. "It is correct as far as it goes, but it does not go nearly far enough. And in time, you will discover that the universe is far stranger and far more wonderful than you currently believe." Yuna found herself stepping forward before she could stop herself. "Even if time travel were possible," she said, "evolution does not work this way, and 2,000 years is not enough time for such extreme physical transformation. So how can you possibly be human?" Siren looked at her, and Yuna felt as if the being could see every cell in her body, every thought in her mind, every dream she had ever dreamed. "You are Dr. Yuna Beek," Siren said. "You have studied xenobiology for 2 decades, and you have always believed that if alien life existed, it would be stranger than we could imagine. How do you know that?" Yuna whispered. "Because your work inspired generations of scientists who came after you," Siren said. "And because you are correct that biological evolution could not create us in such a short time." She paused, and her light seemed to pulse with something like excitement. "Humanity's transformation was not biological," she continued. "It was something far more profound, something that began in the mind and extended to the soul. And it changed not just your bodies, but your relationship with reality itself." The other ascendant had spread out across the rooftop, and Yuna noticed that wherever they stood, the air seemed cleaner, the light seemed brighter, as if their very presence was healing something broken in the world. "Why have you come?" Secretary General Choi asked. "If you are truly from the future, what do you want from us?" "We want nothing from you," Siren said. "We have come to give you a gift, the gift of truth, the gift of knowing what you truly are and what you can become." "And what is that?" Admiral Guk demanded. "What do you believe we are?" Siren's smile widened, and in that smile Yuna saw pride, fierce and burning. "The pride of a child for its parents. You are the most remarkable species in the galaxy," Siren said. "You are beings whose emotions shape reality, whose dreams touch dimensions that other species cannot even perceive, whose capacity for love and sacrifice and hope has changed the fate of 1,000 worlds." She looked around at the gathered humans, at the jets circling overhead, at the cameras broadcasting her words to every corner of the planet. "But you do not know this yet," she said. "You look at yourselves and see weakness, limitation, mortality, and you do not understand that these things you call weaknesses are actually the source of your greatest power." Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. Though she could not have said why, "How can you show us?" she asked. "How can you prove any of this?" Siren extended her hand, and her fingers were long and elegant, glowing with that inner light. "I can show you directly," she said. "I can share with you the visions of your future, the history that has not yet happened, but that lives in us like memory." Yuna looked at Secretary General Choi, who nodded slowly. "Do it," Choi said. "Show us what we will become." Siren stepped forward until she stood directly before Yuna, and her eyes were galaxies, spinning with stars and secrets. "You were chosen for this moment. Dr. Beek," she said softly, "your mind is open enough to receive what we have to show, and your heart is strong enough to carry the weight of truth." She reached out and touched her fingertips to Yuna's forehead, and the touch was warm, electric, alive. "Let us show you what your species truly is," Siren said. The world went white, and Yuna felt herself falling upward into light, into knowledge, into a future she could never have imagined. And somewhere in that light, she heard billions of voices singing. And all of them were human, and all of them were calling her home.